Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Breakfast for Champions, where we endeavor to deliver your weekly dose of sales, nutrition, and insight. And this week, I think we will definitely hit the mark because our guest chef this morning is Jake Dunlap. And for those of you not familiar with Jake, Jake is the CEO of Scaled. And in that role, every day, Jake helps companies operationalize key aspects of their sales and marketing organizations. As CEOs, senior executives, and salespeople, our world is changing so rapidly and keeping pace is extremely hard. Jake and Scaled help both strategic and tactical support through various phases of scaling. And when large organizations are looking to reinvent or stay relevant with their current marketing and sales strategies. Sounds like a big bite. Jake, welcome to the breakfast.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it. That was a perfect intro. You nailed it. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much. I had help. I want to jump into a couple of areas, but I was listening to an interview or a video that you had recently, and you mentioned something that sort of hit home because I had Mike Bosworth on a couple of weeks ago. And we talked about the fact that sales is a skills-based profession. So there's skills involved, plus there's the challenge of being a professional. And then both he and I remarked or maybe lamented the fact that we're the only profession that doesn't practice between games. And, we found it interesting. If you play football, you probably watch the game tape through the week, you do your exercises and so on. And for me, that's one of the things that's holding back us as a tribe from being a true profession. And I'm just wondering what you've seen and what you can do to help, or what you suggest people do to really be true professionals in practice.
Well, there's a couple of things in there that we can talk about. And then at the very last word you said, which is practice. I was fortunate, I think, in retro, it's kind of like those weird things that happen in life. I actually enjoyed reading, when I was a kid, and kind of in college, you kind of get away from it, too busy, I guess, partying or taking my sweet time and working too. I worked full time in college, and my first job out of college, I did some sales jobs in college. I had my ability to get uncomfortable. I did telemarketing. I had to get your credit card over the phone. So when I came into the workforce, as a professional, I was light years ahead of all these other new grads. So, but there was an older, aka was 28 probably at the time. And, he started getting me into books, hey, Jake, this is a good sales book. And then, we're talking about the classics, right? Zig Ziglar, Brian Tracy. And then I went to a company later called Career Builder. They were big on some of this as well too. And so very early in my career, I read a lot of marketing books. I was into Seth Godin back in the early 2000s. I was reading books like Purple Cow, All Marketers Are Liars. And so, sales for me, it satisfied so many different things. I didn't, I knew I was naturally good at it. And it's pretty quickly, I realized this is going to be my thing. And what I did is I was always learning. I'm like, oh, I can try that technique. I'd listen to someone say something. I'm like, great, I'm just going to rip that off and go do it, make it easier. Right. And so I think when you think about sales as a profession, you have to be upping your game. You have to be testing this stuff. It's not enough. And the amount of people I know that listen to podcasts and then don't do anything about it, or read a book and then don't do anything about it, I've never understood that mindset, And so there's that. And then the second piece is the practice piece. So one, are you feeding your brain, and are you whether you like podcasts or books, I don't really care. Go execute that. Go steal from the best practices. I'm telling you what works, and you're telling people what works. Just go. That's what I did to advance, relatively quickly in my career. Is I'd see people who are ahead of me and just, start to emulate them, and, then start to put my own tweaks on it once I got better at it. And then the second is practice, meaning, I was doing a workshop with an NBA team last week, and I said, how many of you are listening? How many of you are watching your own Zooms or calls? 3 hands went up out of 50. I'm like, guys, how are you ever going to get better? And if you want to be elite, you have to watch the game film, right? The best of the best athletes, the best of the best people in any profession, they go and watch how they perform. Yes, it's awkward. Yes, it's uncomfortable. We don't like to hear our own voice. Trust me, I've been there. I get it. I'm obviously over it now, and I'll make all the videos I can. But you've got, and that's what I was able to do very early in my career. I could go back and analyze myself and not judge myself. I could go back and listen and be like, oh, an objection would come up or something toward the end, and I would be like, ugh, okay. And then I go back and be like, you said it this way. Don't say it this way. Next time, say it that way. I wasn't sitting around waiting for my boss to be like, hey, Jake, it's time for our meeting to walk through. Like, I don't need, like, that was helpful too. But just imagine if you're sitting there waiting for your boss to critique a call, or you're waiting for someone to come in and help, maybe you're getting what, 1 or 2 at bats, maybe three at bats a month. I was getting 20 to 30 a month because I could go in and listen and try to pinpoint where I messed up to try to create like the perfect process, right? Really like to where I eliminate all the objections. We get to the end and like, there's a fit. It's either going to move forward. Like I've done everything that I can do to put us in the best possible position to win. So very long answer to a short question, but that's it. You got to nourish your brain, and you got to do it outside of work hours. And then you got to watch your game film. And sometimes you got to do that out of work hours. But if you really want to elevate your game and get better, it's really the only way I know how to do it.
And it's funny you say that, because at the beginning you talked about committing to, you knew this was going to be your thing. And I would say that for the first 6-7 years of my sales career, I wasn't sure that it was going to be my thing. But I remember that once I committed, that's when I started picking up the books and studying. But same time, I had a young person reach out to me last week, and they said they're committing to sales. So they're talking to as many talking heads as possible to get, and I thought it was really great because he truly was at the beginning of his career, and he's reached out to me. And the great question that he asked me at the end is, who should he talk to next? So he really is showing that level of commitment and so on.
As long as he's doing something about it, right? There's no shortage. Like I see a lot of people out there, and I'm sure you do too, that like, well, let me go do this. It's like action. Like you heard it. He talked to you now, and I know you do this in your workshops. You're like, and now go do something about it tomorrow and tell me how it went. And I think too many people too, they kind of sit there and they're waiting. They're waiting for that perfect. There's never a perfect time. I got a phone actually earlier today with a company that just implemented a sales engagement platform. I think I'm overanalyzing this, and I'm like, you are. Hit send, pick up the phone, like start to execute, and treat it like a science experiment. It's not a failure or success. It's just a data point. And so you got to always balance that learning with testing and doing. It's kind of my philosophy on a lot of this.
I start most of my prospecting workshops with a quote out of, I don't know if you've read the book, Five Frogs on a Log. It's by a couple of ex-McKinsey guys. Great little analogy, feel free. But, he talks about 5 frogs sitting on a log, and 4 decide to jump off. How many are left on the log? And the obvious answer is 1, but the real answer is 5, because deciding to do something and doing something are 2 different things. And I always say, like, I don't want to come back and have any frog conversations and things. So it challenges them not to sit back and just take it in at the beginning. The other thing you touched on in there that I think is interesting, and I think it does speak to people's set of minds or what have you, I'm curious in your view, is the whole thing about technology. When I was growing up, there was probably very few ways they could listen in, other than if we held the handset like that.
We had Y cords. I don't know if you remember those. Like
basically,
the Y cord, it would be like you plug the Y cord into like the headset, and then my boss would be like sitting here, and I would have my headset on, and she'd be put it on mute, because there wasn't as much video conferencing was just starting to kind of mid 2000s, early 2000s, GoToMeeting kind of started the initial parts. But yeah, we had Y cords. I don't know if anyone
and of course you felt completely natural with your manager sitting right next to you, right? It was a really good example of how you would sell, right?
It's so interesting. For me, I think most people know it never bought it. If anything, it made me prep harder and better. But like here's how I look at it. If you can handle those pressure situations, when it's a call on your own, like you're golden. And so I think a lot of people, it's like my manager's listening or my peers are listening. I'm like, man, if you can get up for that type of pressure, man, you're going to get better faster. You're going to get so much better faster. So yeah, but that's right. A lot of people though could not handle it at all.
But the great thing now is technology has evolved, right? So like it's fairly easy to plug an app onto Salesforce or any other platforms and capture these conversations, whether they're phone calls or Zoom-based presentations. So, but I find that even though they have that capability, they don't take full advantage of it, like you say, to create sort of best of, like a hall of fame of best of calls that they can run through, that maybe a new recruit can run through and get some. Yep. So it's, to me, I guess and I'm looking for validation or a different opinion, it comes down to the managers, and we can talk about the reason. But when I was growing up, if a VP of sales ran into trouble at the end of the year and they asked her or him what they need, they would always ask for another head count. They figure if they throw another body at it, they'll come out of it, right? I find now they say, give me this app, and they throw an app at it, but nothing really changes because they haven't addressed the human side of that app. So I'm just curious what you're seeing out there, because I think in one of your things you talked about tech versus other things, but to me, this tech versus headcount mentality, all that's changed is what they're throwing at it. I don't think they've changed their thinking.
I still think they're throwing heads at it too. It's interesting. So the best analogy that I have for this is in sales and sales leadership, we tend to judge a man or woman's worth by the size of the team they've managed, right? Susie Smith managed 200 people and took a company to 100 million in revenue. John managed a team of 45 people and took a company to 100 million revenue. Coming out the other side of the experience, John is not looked on as favorably as Susie, even though the reality is John was able to scale much more effectively, not just efficiently, but effectively. So there's just a foundational flaw that until people realize that the goal is to get there, as fast as possible. And I'm okay. Like there's times I've been there, right? I had to hire my first year at Glassdoor, I had to hire 40. I hired 40 people in 1 year. And God, I made so many stupid mistakes, but I didn't have a choice, man. When you take that venture capital money, you better go. And that's the only option. And so I just don't think that the big issue that I see, though, is that sales leaders have outsourced their knowledge of what sales technology can do. And so what that means is that they're continuing to repeat building the same sales orgs that they've built 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, because they've outsourced their knowledge to sales operations. And so they don't even know what outreach or other sales, they don't even know what these tools can do. They're like, yeah, that's like you put some sequences in it. It's like, yes. And you can create all these automations and you can do this. And like Insight Square, it's like, yeah, it's like a better dashboard. It's like, no, actually you can start to really analyze key details of like your sales cycle to, shrink your stage 3 by 50%. And so and so then we hired RevOps, and RevOps is just it's an ops team for ops team, which it's the hot button right now. It's going to sizzle out in the next like year and a half, just like ABM and everything else. Because the problem isn't we don't have the data. The problem is we don't know what to do with the tools and how to make them more efficient. So it will all come full circle. Like in the next 5 to 10 years, it's just going to be required. People are going to say like, look, how do you not know how to do this? And, we were talking about this ahead of time. It's why we've built this practice of, being one of the first sales technology optimization companies, because I think we see the writing on the wall and leaders picking their head up who've been in the game for 20 years and being like, I got to figure this out. So, yeah.
So to me, I wonder if that could happen without a change in leadership, because one of the things that I don't like about sales, and I love the profession and I'm proud of it, is that we tend to do things like we were trained, right? So you look at your manager and so forth. So at one point that chain has to be broken, and somebody that understands the power of that technology and the power of that technology to change the interaction with customers, has to change. So how do you see that rotation at the top happening, or are we just going to have to go out and have a revolution?
How would I describe this? Well, one, let's talk about like millennial kind of workforce, right? So millennial will dominate the workforce in the next 5 years, right? It'll be a lion's share of the people that are in the workforce. It'll bring a new type of leader. It'll bring a new type of people looking for different solutions. The other trend is our consumer behavior. Our consumer behavior is becoming so real time, so everything at our fingertips, that we will expect a similar experience in B2B. Can you imagine not having like Amazon 1-day delivery or click to buy? Well, 5 years ago is like, well, of course I'm going to wait a week or 2 weeks to get that thing. Now it's like, I got to wait 3 days. So as consumer behavior changes, that will trickle into our day to day. And so I think as new leaders are promoted, we'll start to think of ways to remove friction and meet people where they're at in the customer journey versus I was talking to a sales leader yesterday about this, that, we've built kind of a ladder type experience, like this step, then this step, then this step. The reality is sales it is relatively predictable, candidly, but it's more like a lattice, meaning you kind of like, this one goes V1, it goes here, and then it goes to this step, and then this one goes here, and it kind of goes like that. And it does actually behave in relatively predictive patterns once you understand the players that are involved and the typical steps to buying. And so I think we're going to have to create more of those types of experiences where we're enabling sales organizations to not just follow a ladder, which is like a lead comes in, I do this, and then this person, as opposed to what if that lead actually, you're treating people that come in at an intent level of 7 the same way as the person that comes in at an intent level of 2. And right. A person comes in at the intent level of 9 and you make them talk to an inbound SDR, are you mentally insane? Right? Like you're qualifying, like you're qualifying. And so we've got to just realize that as these patterns emerge, and they're not even emerging, like my friend, the writing is on the wall that it's about reducing the future of B2B sales is reducing friction and being very laser focused on meeting the customer where they're at in their journey. How do I understand where they're at, and shepherding through and having the right materials at the right time, or the right demo environment at the right time, that they can self-guide and do all these other kind of really cool things that we're seeing out there. So yeah, I think that's kind of where I believe that we're headed.
So maybe we can expand on that a bit, because coming out of the last recession, or shall we say major economic event, if you look, Forrester and a lot of people were predicting that B2B sales teams, like the B2B sales population in the States anyway, was going to be reduced by 25%. I remember watching the guy at an Aptus event where he was saying it. And if anything, it's grown by that much because they need somebody to operate all those apps, right? So where do you see sales, in any way that you want to talk about it, the abstract or concrete, in say 5 years from now, coming out of this current crisis?
25%. That might be a little high in 5 years. What I found in sales, and look, I've been at this for 2003, so I'm 18 years in. Jeez. Right. But I've seen the cycles enough. I've been through a meltdown, and then the rebirth, and then the meltdown. So I've at least seen the cycles like a time and a half now, to know that things actually move a little bit slower. I think in 5 years, technology will just be, we're just not, all the manual data stuff, the ability to think about sales forecasting for a second. Just think about the insanity of what forecasting is. It is one person's opinion of where a deal is in the process. There's no validation from the buyer, zero, right? So I think I think tools are going to be able to do a lot of that stuff. It's going to get really good at saying, you know what, this is actually at 60% or 70%. And you don't need to enter your emails in or pull in key data points. The AI will listen to this call, that we're on, and it'll pull the things into the right field. So I think it's going to eliminate a lot of the mundane, which should be great, assuming that we then use that additional time to go and, do more value add and right. Activities, because I think that's it. It's that I also think customers want maybe a different relationship with sellers, than they maybe did before. And the pandemic kind of proved that. Meaning, if you ask people in January of 2020 and you said, do you know that you can close 8-figure deals via 100% remote? Impossible. No chance. Say 7-figure deals. No. You got to be there. You got to shake their hands and build a relationship. It's like, no, you don't. It's not what a customer wants. A customer wants value. And so I think the role of sales is kind of emerging to be this tech-enabled project, expert project manager. We could call it consultative sales. That's, by the way, everyone, someone's like, Jake, there's a term I heard the other day, consultative sales. I'm like, you got to be joking me. I heard that again, 18 years ago.
My father had a great saying, and he said that there's no such thing as old jokes, just old people.
There you go. And so we are I am the old person now, where it's, but it really will be required. I think that's it. You used to be able to get by with, in a lot of industries with being, quasi knowledgeable. It's kind of interesting, how much we're relying now on sales engineers, right? Yeah. And we're relying on people. It's like, how do you as a seller not know how to demo your product? There's maybe 4% of products that maybe is the case. The other 96 is just lazy, Well, I don't get into the technical details. I bring in Tim. The technical, you don't know how to talk about the use cases of your end user. How can you sell anything? So that salesperson is gone. In the next
Right.
10 years, that persona is eliminated. There are probably some legacy industries and some really old school legacy industries where it will perpetuate for another 15 to 20 years. But I think that's it. It's that, buyers really want someone, you're going to have to become an expert in your space. You're going to have to become an expert truly in what these people do and what they care about, which, by the way, none of this is new. That's what also made you an A player 15 years ago. But I think it's a difference between now. It's required that if you can't add value in that interaction, why am I talking to you? Right? Like, and I can't, and the sad part is, man, sales is getting worse. I can't tell you how many of our clients that, they get off the phone with a tech vendor, and we're talking some of the hottest tech companies you can imagine. And the names I'm talking about. Yeah. And they're like, that was atrocious. They're like, the sales, it's like, they only know how to demo. They only know how to qualify. Get them on the phone. Get them on the phone. I got a client. I'm going through this right now with a very well-known $100 million plus a year sales tech company. And our client's like, hey, can you just send me the demo? Like, my week's packed. I want to look at it. Well, we need to get on the phone and I want to walk you through it. Like, it's like, you don't get it. I get it. Look, I was taught that exact same way. And there are times when I get it, but that's not how people want to consume right now. Right? That's why people are moving from cable to OTE, so they can consume when they want. So, I feel like we just have to be able to be adaptable and not just run the ladder. The people that only can do the ladder, they don't know about their product. Those are the people I'm most scared for. If I'm being candid.
Yeah, it's not a linear process in any way, and we try and sort of put it this way, but it's really a bunch of tornadoes or whatever those things are, the whirlwinds going at each other and so on. You talked in one of the interviews about access to information, and again, I always found it interesting that salespeople try and guard the information that they have and so on. Whereas, again, maybe I'm weird, but I found sharing it just gives me more authority and gives me an opportunity to discuss it, as opposed to, what am I going to do with it if I have it?
Yeah, so, exactly.
So, in terms of the information, here's the challenge. I find that a lot of salespeople, going back almost the flip side of the coin of what we talked about, is they can relay the information, but they can't communicate how it's going to impact the customer. And so, to what degree is that something that marketing should be doing? Is that something that sales should be doing? How do we change this flow of information? Because I find that in some organizations, marketing does create some great insight for customers, but then you've got this guy at the end who's an account executive who decides he's going to be an editor. How do we create that flow of information to benefit the customer?
It's really interesting. I mean, part of me is, how can you be, or, call yourself a salesperson or like be in sales if you don't know what your customer cares about? Like, for me, some of the best advice I give people is, it's just go to your CS or account management team and go hop on 10 customer calls and hear what they say. Like, just again, going back to ripping off that. The other thing is called Google. It's called Google. You sell to industrial manufacturing operations managers. Fantastic. You go to Google and you type in trends in industrial manufacturing 2021 and 2022. There you go. So I feel like there's a laziness, a part of this as well too, of like, as leaders, we're not doing a very good job of training people to really understand the customer. And again, I'm very fortunate. I had some, early in my career, I was successful just with like raw talent. Then I went to a larger company that really kind of taught me the process and methodology. And this was kind of a core belief system about like, you have to know your buyers and your industries. And I remember getting a binder that was this thick of like industry trends in the industry that we sold to in, it's like mid 2000s. So, it's tough, as an individual, if you can't understand what the buyer does or what their day-to-day is, I don't think you can ever be really successful. I think it's I think you could be a B player, if you kind of understand some of the product stuff and like a certain innovator type or early adopter buyer can get that, but you certainly won't be able to sell to other people if you can't show that you understand what they actually do. And, I was very fortunate, I worked at Career Builder for 4 years, and we were territory by region, and I ran the Pacific Northwest. And so, man, I got to learn every industry. I mean, I had to go deep on avionics to manufacturing to tech to like all this stuff. And so I had to learn and ask questions and be curious. And what is a CNC machinist? What's the key things that they do? Like, I don't know what a CNC machinist is. You know, so I think that there's that, and then just being curious. Ask your buyers, hey, what's top of mind? What are the top 2 priorities you have? And then being able to kind of, talk it back to them.
Yeah, sorry, I interrupted. I was gonna say it's that curiosity that I think is missing sometimes.
And it's not their part, meaning as a part of that, like, again, a lot of this is
leadership.
It's not their fault. It's leadership. That if we're sitting here and you're telling someone on this call, we got to get BANT, medic. You got to medic them. You got to medic them. We got to command the message. If that's what you're training people to do, versus I need to try to understand what's happening in this person's world, what their actual priorities are. Maybe we fit in there. Maybe what we do is actually priority number 75. That's cool too. The facts are the facts. So I think we're almost training curiosity out of sales by over focusing on qualification, when the reality is people are already coming to us with higher levels of intent many times when they open the door.
So we've got about 2 minutes left, because I always promise the audience that they'll be out of here by 8:30 and making money by 9. In a quick response, because I do want to get you to share where people can find you. But what's the one thing that you're happy that COVID got rid of in sales? Like, what's the one victim that was justified?
Yeah, the command and a little bit of the command and control of sales leadership. That I need my team here. I need to be there to put my thumb on them to make sure that they do their things. I think a lot of people prove like they can actually be pretty self-sufficient. So I think that mindset, and by the way, I probably would have put myself in that book to some extent of like, man, could you really have 100-person remote inside sales team that now goes virtual? I think part of me would have been very skeptical, but I think the fact that if you empower people, you get them up to speed correctly, people will usually do the right thing and still keep working pretty hard without, needing to be having their thumb on them by their leader or their director or their VP.
So I think we just scratched the surface, because with each of those, we can probably go for another half hour. So if people wanted to continue and explore Jake, where can they find you?
Yeah, so a couple places. One, definitely go check out the podcast. We've got it's crazy, 17, 18 episodes now. It's on Jake. Just go to jakedunlap.com. It's been a really awesome experience. We've got CEOs, we've got some celebrities, we've got a real mix of people just sharing their journeys. We've got I just interviewed yesterday one of the first people in Iraq. He's a Army Ranger, Green Beret, and before that I interviewed lots of really cool stuff. So if you're really like into like hearing people's story and journey, please check out the podcast. And then look, LinkedIn, right? I'm posting on LinkedIn multiple times a day. Just be warned that if you connect with me, you can't lose me then at that point. Like, I will follow you through all out the reaches of LinkedIn. You will see my content. So yeah, and again, I post a mix of video and very tactical. We were talking about that before. I'm a big fan of the tactics. Like, just do this. Just literally say it this exact way, and like this thing will work. So and then on the tactical front too, I've got like 400, 500 videos up on YouTube now. So I really, any of those, check out the podcast. I'd love to hear what you think. Day-to-day LinkedIn. And if you want to kind of go deep on some topics, go check out YouTube.
And we'll put all those links in the notes for the show. Thank you very much for being on. And for the audience, thanks for sitting in. And don't forget that you'll be able to get the audio version of this as the Monday morning Breakfast with Champion podcast, Originality in Marketing. Jake, thank you very much. And I hope that you'll come back sometime in the near future.
Cool. I'm really looking forward to it. I really enjoyed it. And yeah, thanks again.
Thank you.